So Nick Dixon has at some point been a GB News contributor. I'm not sure if he still does contribute to GB News. I wouldn't be surprised if he did. He's a bit of kind of a right-wing culture warrior type, and he's got his own podcast where he talks about all things UK politics, etc., etc. And I was looking through YouTube for videos about Zack Polanski to respond to, and I noticed this one. It's a clip from their podcast called Farage versus Palansky, and I watched the first couple of minutes, and it includes some pretty interesting statements, so I'm going to respond to those now.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Palansky, Paul, because one interesting question is, will the BBC side with Palansky or Farage? Because there is, to steelman the argument, there is a case that like they do put Farage on a lot. Do they in some way want to sort of welcome him into the regime, or is he just there because they had to have someone to look impartial and he's good TV? Probably that.
So he's the only opposition voice, Nick.
Yeah,
Kenny Badenoch is not wanting to speak.
I mean, Nigel Farage going on the BBC long predates the current era of politics. I mean, he was continually on like Question Time, for example, during the debate about leaving the European Union. And whilst it's true there were certainly some Tories that were part of the Leave campaign, like Michael Gove and Boris Johnson, the reality is that the official Conservative position was to remain in the European Union, so he was there as the voice of Leave at the time. It's not them just pretending to be impartial. No, it was actual impartiality that they were sticking to, because impartiality is part of the BBC's remit, you know? I think he was over-platformed, given that he was just an MEP and not an actual member of parliament, when you could have got on a Steve Baker or a Boris Johnson or a Michael Gove to be advocating for this stuff from an actual elected position rather than just a rabble-rouser from the sidelines. But whatever, that was the choice that they made at the time.
She's still in her 2 years hiatus.
Well, true. I mean, over the years when they've had him on, it's like the only guy that's pro-Brexit and he's good on telly. Now, more recently, if you want to get conspiratorial, you can say there's been a sort of warming of the regime towards, and the regime here, I mean, basically the whole blob that runs our country, in this case, the media. But you could argue they've warmed up to Farage. And one question is, who will they side? It's always clear who they side with. It's clear they didn't like Corbyn. It's clear they like Starmer. They like Blair. They accepted May for the reasons I've stated. Now,
they also very much liked David Cameron. I mean, the fact that our entire media ecosystem love bombed David Cameron, accepted his entirely faulty premise for austerity, which was not correct anyway in terms of basic economic analysis of the fact that you do expansionary policy in a recession. You do counter-cyclical stimulus in a liquidity trap. Like, this is basic economics, and people just kind of forgot throughout our entire media ecosystem. Even the Financial Times, even the FT, who usually have pretty good journalism, backed David Cameron's austerity during the worst possible time to do an austerity budget when you're in a liquidity trap. And he is like the most right-wing prime minister this country's ever had since, like, maybe not Thatcher, but he's incredibly right-wing on loads of issues, especially on the economy. And they loved bomb him to kingdom come, really.
Will they like Farage more than Palansky? This is my question, because Palansky, on one level, he's like a complete communist nutcase. But also, is he just actually another neolib in different clothing? We sort of saw it with Mamdani. Mamdani comes in and he's talking like an old-school communist. You look at some of the things he's actually doing and you think, actually, he's just going to be another establishment guy who just pretends.
Incredible scenes. So, Zack Polanski is apparently a communist neoliberal, chat. You heard it here first on the Nick Dixon podcast about somehow supporting free market austerity economics. That's what neoliberalism is, like market fundamentalism, whilst also supporting communism and worker ownership. That doesn't make any sense, Nick. I think you'll find that doesn't make any sense at all. And likewise is the same with Mamdani. Like, he's not a neoliberal. If you look at both of these people and their policy prescriptions, right, you look at the Green Party's plan, which involves lots of government intervention, lots of state ownership and nationalisation, better workers' rights, demand-side labour market reform, and more industrial policy. These are all things that are the opposite of neoliberal economics, right? These are, to be fair, mostly social democratic. They're not exactly socialist, but they're old school kind of Harold Wilson style labour policies in terms of wanting to do industrial investment in the technologies of the future or whatever. Very similar was true of the Biden administration. And Mamdani is the opposite of the establishment. The establishment all came out to try and destroy him. The fact that the entirety of the establishment, Republicans and Democrats, all rallied behind Andrew Cuomo, even as he lost the Democratic Party's nomination as this neoliberal establishment candidate. The idea that Mamdani is anywhere near the establishment is crazy, or indeed anywhere near neoliberalism. is crazy, because his policy is also very social democratic in terms of public services free at the point of use, funded through progressive taxation. Now, he can't really do industrial policy because he is constrained by the fact he has a municipal budget rather than a national budget. Same true with like trade policy, for example. But the idea that either of these people are neoliberals, but also like apparently simultaneously communists, is the silliest thing I've ever heard. Literally the silliest thing I've ever heard. Neoliberalism and communism are polar opposites to each other. What the hell is he even saying?
To be this, a bit like Obama. He'll do some things, but not much. But would the BBC prefer, though?
I mean, Obama didn't do anything, and that's why people chose people like Mamdani. Like, Obama didn't fundamentally change the structure of the American economy at all, really, and paid off the bankers. Like, Mamdani's plan is to actually tax the people who work in these financial institutions at the heart of Manhattan and use that to fund social programs. What social programs did Obama fund? He spent it mostly on drone strikes, as far as I can remember. Like, how is Mamdani in any way similar to Obama? It's crazy talk.
A Farage over Palansky. I mean, Farage really, he's going to be quite moderate. He's going to be a free marketeer, Thatcherite. He's still in the mold of Blair, because Blair's in the mold of Thatcher and Farage in the mold of Thatcher. He's not that far out from a Tony Blair, really.
Not really.
Would they side with him more than they
the
would?
other reason, of course, you see Nigel.
I mean, that's a really interesting admission. That Blair, Thatcher, and Farage are all basically cut from the same cloth. It's all free market, neoliberal capitalism at the end of the day. There's no social democracy, there's no socialism, there's no worker ownership, there's no nothing. There is just free markets and international competition. They're all pro-free trade, they don't like trade protectionism, they all believe in Atlanticism, they all believe that we should be a vassal state of the United States, and they're all pro-Israel. That's the things that they all share. That's true. I mean, he's right in saying that Farage is the establishment. He's the same as all the other politicians. And Palansky is the other one that's not, who doesn't believe in free market capitalism, who doesn't believe in the removal of power from working class people, who doesn't believe in the removal of state intervention into the economy, who supports higher taxation, more workers' rights, and more worker ownership. Like, that is the antidote to the Thatcherism of Farage and Blair and Thatcher.
Farage.
Palansky.
It's much like if you look at any panel, and I'll get to Palansky in a second. It's a great question there. But if you look at any panel on GB News, it's probably got 3 right wingers and 1 left winger to appease Ofcom. BBC only know left wingers, so they're trying to do the converse, the opposite, with Nigel Farage. They're like, well, who the hell are we going to put in that spot?
When have the left ever had any space on BBC? You will have a social liberal and a liberal conservative. They certainly have a liberal bias, I'll give you that, but liberalism is a right-wing ideology that supports Thatcherism and free markets, right? Like, they will have a Ken Clarke versus an Alex Davies-Jones, and then you have kind of the more radical right and left, represented by Danny Kruger and Zara Sultan. That was the last question time. They'll have a Spectator columnist and a Tory politician and a Reform politician and a Labour politician and a left-wing economist or whatever. Like, when have they ever had it unbalanced against the right rather than balanced towards the right? When have the left ever got a look in on any amount of political discussion on the BBC outside of the very short period where Jeremy Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party, where they had no choice to do so because they are, under their own constitution, supposed to put a member of the official opposition against a member of the official government? That was the only time the left have ever got a look in at all on the BBC, was that Corbyn period. Other than that, we saw that Nigel Farage literally has the most question time appearances of anybody. Boris Johnson got his launch as a politician from continually being the funny guy hosting Have I Got News For You. You look at Politics Live, for example, their mainstream politics programme. Before they changed the format very recently, it always was. There were 4 guests. A member of the government, a member of the opposition, 1 right-wing commentator or other politician, and a left-wing commentator or other politician, or left liberal mostly. They did sometimes get leftists on, like they would sometimes have like Bel Ribeiro Ade representing Labour, or they'd have Faiza Shaheen coming on as a left-wing economist, right? But mostly it's just liberals. It's mostly liberals, and they've consistently had representatives from Reform UK on, probably because they are very high in the polls and have been for quite a while. The idea that the BBC is a lack of balance here compared to GB News, which is explicitly entirely stacking their panels to the right, is crazy talk.
Because we don't know anyone. Who do they know? Well, I mean, You could ask Rupert Lowe, I guess, but they're not going to ask Rupert Lowe. But who else could they ask? Robert Jenrick? Well, yes, you could ask Robert Jenrick.
Well, Alex Phillips, she's been on Politics Live loads of times. They even had Lee Anderson on instead of a member of the official opposition, because Reform basically are the opposition at this point. Like, no one thinks that Kemi Badenoch is going to be taking the Conservative Party anywhere. They constantly have these people on. Gawain Towler was on not just the BBC, but on Sky News as well. Right wing of the Conservative Party have had a look in. People like Steve Baker, as was pointed out, Robert Jenrick, Kemi Badenoch. All these people have had platforms on the BBC. What are you talking about?
But Nigel Farage is the most popular right-wing voice. So, of course, they speak to him. They have to. It's the go-to. It's like being a lefty on GB News. You can get...
I mean, but Nigel Farage was being platformed even before he was the most popular right-winger. When he was just a random, like, anti-EU, pro-Brexit person on the sideline of politics as an MEP, he was invited on Question Time loads of times.
Plenty of work on GB News as a lefty if you come on and say the right things. Now, of course, Nigel Farage is not going on the BBC and saying the right things so that he can be the Ofcom fodder. He also has a lot to say and he's incredibly popular. What's going to become...
Oh, that's a really good point, Edward. They keep bringing on Tufton Street people. They keep bringing on, like, the most extreme right-wing ideologues from Tufton Street, from the IEA, or from Policy Exchange, or from the Centre for Policy Studies, or for CAPEX, the Centre for Policy Studies fucking consent manufacturing branch. They will constantly have people on who represent the most extreme right-wing economic positions, because they are fully paid up mouthpieces of Tufton Street and stuff with petrochemical billionaire cash. But what has Reem Ibrahim ever done that warrants a position on a mainstream politics show, other than being somebody who the IEA hired because she was good on TikTok? Like, yeah, Kate Andrews. And you know what? It's fine. It's fine to have them involved, to have somebody represents right-wing economics. That's not a problem. The issue is when you have nobody representing left-wing economics outside of that Corbyn period. Like when you don't have a Faiza Shaheen, have a Grace Blakely, if you don't have a Richard Murphy. And that's what was lacking for far too long. But the Tufton Street rogues gallery of right-wing talking heads get endless platforms on the BBC. And again, I think it's because they have an impartiality clause that they actually do stick to.
Very interesting with Palansky is he's new and he's really shaken up the left of politics. So up until 6 weeks ago, or whatever it was, we had this massive burgeoning right-wing wave led by Nigel Farage, and there was no one to counter it because no one in Labour looked like they could do it. But it needed something special, and special has many meanings, Nick, but it needed something special. And along comes Zack Polanski, and he pulled the string, and out comes every batshit left-wing idea that anyone's ever had. And you just look at the leadership of the Green Party. You look at the leadership of the Green Party, and it's got one of these and one of those. None of them can form a cohesive thought. But
I mean, it is funny to say they can't form a cohesive thought whilst not being able to say a cohesive sentence. I understand that people can misspeak, that's fine, but it's just kind of a funny irony to that. Interesting, at no point has he bothered to elucidate why he thinks these ideas are batshit, or why he doesn't think they have coherent thoughts. I mean, clearly they're coherent enough to be able to capture the imagination of the public, enough so that the Green Party in some polls are in second place. I mean, most of the right wing's ideas are batshit. We've seen 46 years of batshit right-wing economic policy that's ruined this country from Thatcher onwards. The idea that somehow a shifting of the dial even slightly towards social democracy, which is basically all that Zack Polanski and the Green Party are offering in terms of changing the economic system, is somehow batshit, i.e. a return to something resembling the post-war consensus that had better living standards and a higher aggregate growth over that period than we've had since the Thatcher reforms, is nonsense. It's nonsense, you know?
They can get, again, it's pull the string and...
They got the posh, hot posh chick. I said the other day, posh chicks are either batshit crazy commies or they're literally married to Oswald Mosley. Those are the two options. Like they're like the furthest right person you've ever seen. Oh yes, darling. Of course we should kill them all. What? And then, or they're just like the most open borders, chucking glue and paint on a Van Gogh. You know, those are the two options.
Saying that the majority of people coming from Eritrea and Afghanistan are lawyers and doctors.
Yeah.
And all that sort of stuff. Look, so Zack Polanski is going to be an important part of the rhetoric in the coming years. He absolutely is, in the same way that Nigel Farage is. What Zack's got going against him is he is a byproduct of the batshit stuff that's now moving towards the centre, like the Labour Party. He's a byproduct of that. He's a reaction to that. And people have had enough of that. What Zack hasn't figured out yet is that he's not converting anyone. He's just coalescing the Corbynites and those that are disenfranchised by Labour now. That's all he's doing. He's breaking up the left. What Farage is doing...
I mean, that's not necessarily true. A lot of people who are supporting the Greens now from their newer cohort of voters are previous non-voters. We've won over Liberal Democrats. Even Tories are voting for us. I mean, we literally had 2 MPs in previous Tory constituencies, in North Herefordshire and in Waveney Valley. Literally half of our MPs of the last election were elected from previous Tory constituencies. Now, whilst I don't believe that they've had, like, Damascene conversions into socialists, I don't think that's true at all. But the idea that our entire voter base is coming from disenfranchised Labour voters isn't true. But I do think that there is a section of the people that he's alluding to that being won over by reform who can be won over by Green policies as well. You look internally at More in Common's analysis of these voting demographics, and you see that one thing that is shared between the left and the right in this country on the more radical ends of the political spectrum, obviously relative to where the centre is currently, is a shared skepticism in big business, because there is a gigantic corporate behemoth that's eating up the working people of this country. And on the right, they have conspiracy theories about the World Economic Forum. On the left, we have material theory about the power of capital. And if we sell the story correctly to people, we'll be able to win people over on that axis. We're never going to win over these kind of backbone conservative types. We're never going to win over the real, like, anti-asylum headbangers. But there are plenty of people who are seeing the failure of, like, the breakdown of the social contract, who are looking for any opposition to the current status quo. We just have to sell to these people that our solutions here on the left, that are not represented in any other political party, are the solutions that are actually going to work, rather than just do austerity, do more free markets, allow American megacorporations to eat the country, whilst being mean to asylum seekers at the same time, which is basically the Farage playbook at this point.
He's not offering anything new in the world of politics at all, if you scrutinise it, but he's offering something new in the world of our politics, in the world of the politics since 1990, since Margaret Thatcher stepped down. So he is offering something in living memory which is relatively new and hopeful. And that's why...
No, it's not. It's the same free market neoliberal garbage that has been shoved down our throats by every administration that Nick was decrying earlier on in this segment. What the fuck are you talking about? Their plan is just cut public spending and inshallah. Do more austerity and inshallah. Let's see what happens, right? God wills it, right?
It's going to fall that way, Nick.
Interesting, yeah. I mean, let's see. Polanski, funny thing with people like Polanski, they have an open goal on immigration to just say that it reduces wages and it's evil big corporations, but they can't do it. They have to back the big corporations because they're basically the sort of modern woke batshit left rather than the actual principle left.
I mean, you just don't understand how economics works. Increasing demand increases wages, right? If you have more people with more demand for goods and services, that will increase the demand for labour. Of course, those people also go into the labour market and increase the supply of labour, but it's basically a wash, and the economic studies show that it's a wash. When it comes to wages, the problem is a lack of demand-side labour market policy. We've had 15 years of supply-side labour market policy where we slash welfare, where we slash trade union rights, where we make it easier for people to be hired and fired by corporations, right? Like, we're not taking the side of corporations. You just refuse to critique corporations so that you can focus on the migrants off of chopped misunderstandings of economics, where you think that the only things that migrants do is increase the supply of labour, when they also increase the demand for commodities which are produced by labour, therefore meaning the demand for labour also goes up at the same time. It's interesting because what he's doing here is actually engaging in like an old school Marxist thought of the reserve army of labour. That only works in a closed system, right? The reserve army of labour is the current number of unemployed people. The reserve army of labour was what happened before women entered the workforce, for example. But that's the reserve army of labour. It's not migrants, because they are increasing the overall population, therefore increasing demand at the same time. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of how labour supply works. It's just very easy, if you don't like brown people, or you don't like cultural change or whatever, to make up economic reasons that don't exist for these problems. And even on that case, right, there are a bunch of people who come here or have been part of like the Boris wave. Like a third of the Boris wave was foreign students, right? People coming to study here from overseas. And they contribute as a capital inflow whilst not joining the labour force. The capital inflow will increase demand for labour, therefore pushing up wages, and they're not affecting the labour supply at all because they're not in work because they're students. And as they're using entirely foreign capital to finance their time in the UK, all that does is increase growth and increase wages at the same time. And if they stick around having gotten their degree, they'll also be skilled workers, improving productivity too. The issue, of course, is when it comes to this corporations versus the migrants, the reason why wages have dropped is because corporations lobby governments to do more supply-side labour market reform. It's the same Thatcherism that Nigel Farage represents, it's the same Thatcherism that Tony Blair represented, and it was the same Thatcherism that the Conservative Party have always represented since 1979, that has pushed that supply-side labour market policy to drive down wages at the behest of their corporate donors. The reduction in trade union rights, hence the reductions in the welfare state, hence the reductions in industrial policy. All of those things that have driven down demand for labour and increased the supply of labour deliberately to kneecap wage growth. That was the Osborne plan of controlling inflation during a time when we should have been engaging in expansionary policy. So is Nigel Farage anything new? I mean, not in the history of politics, but also not now either. He's exactly the same. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for memberships. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.